When gods rule, the ones that will hate them the most are those that wish to take their place. Such was the case within the Order of Sith Lords as they pondered the concept of the Celestials. The Celestials were originally a race of mysterious beings that ruled the galaxy in its most primordial era. They were the ones that constructed great machines that built entire planets and solar systems, and they kept the Force itself in balance. That was until a mysterious event caused them to vanish without a trace, leaving behind nothing but their massive technological marvels as evidence of their existence. The last vestiges of their race are the entries known as the Ones, who secretly reside on the world of Mortis. The Celestials were a mystery debated and researched by many beings in the galaxy, the Jedi and Sith included. But while the Jedi regarded them with respect as the precursor peacekeepers to their order, the Sith regarded them with nothing short of loathing. The chief among these was Darth Plagueis, who held the idea of the Celestials, and likely the Ones of Mortis, right alongside them with utter contempt. Greetings again, Acolytes, and welcome back to our archives. In today's holocron, we are going to explore the reasons that Darth Plagueis gives why the Sith Order could not stand the idea of the Celestials. Our source today comes from the Darth Plagueis novel. During his research with the experiments, Plagueis contemplates the Sith Grand Plan and the role the midichlorians will play in it, along with their goals to topple the Jedi. In Plagueis' musings, he reveals that getting rid of the Jedi was not their end goal, only a stepping stone to something much greater. The Jedi themselves were but a symptom of a broken system that all Force-sensitive beings were living in, an illness that the Sith sought to cure. Darth Plagueis says this: "For the toppling of the Jedi Order and the Republic was essential to the task of restoring order to the galaxy. That goal belonged to the realm of the ordinary, to the world that was nothing more than a byproduct of an eternal struggle between the light and dark forces, both of which were beyond any concepts of good or evil. The greater goal of the Sith involved toppling the Force itself, becoming the embodiment of the galaxy's animating principle. It had been theorized by Jedi and Sith alike that balance between the light and dark sides was actually under the guidance of a group of discorporate entities, the ones calling themselves the Celestials. Perhaps those who had emerged themselves with the Force thousands of generations earlier, and had continued to guide the fate of the galaxy ever since. In effect, a higher order of intermediaries whose power were beyond the understanding of mortal beings. But many Sith viewed the notion with disdain, for the theoretical existence of such a group had little bearing on the goal of making the Force subservient to the will of an enlightened elite. Only the Sith understood that sentient life was on the verge of a transformative leap, that through the manipulation of midichlorians, or the overthrow of the forceful group that supervised them, the divide between organic life and the Force could be bridged, and death could be erased from the continuum." This is a lengthy statement and a lot to take in at once, but let's review what he said. Plagueis talks about how removing the Jedi was not merely about destroying an enemy. Long ago, the Dark Lords of the past saw the Jedi as their ultimate adversaries, the ones that are in the way of becoming the galaxy's rulers. But Plagueis and the Rule of Two were now in a place where they believed themselves to have already risen above the Jedi. So far above them, in fact, that their ancient enemies were no more than obstacles to their real end goal, apotheosis, the act of making themselves gods of the galaxy using the dark side as their weapon. They weren't interested in being leaders of the Republic, nor kings of worlds or even emperors. All this was a stepping stone until they could ascend beyond the heights of the stars and become the very guiding principle of the galaxy itself. They wanted their own will to dictate the ebb and flow of the universe. They wanted to own and control the Force itself as their possession, using it as a mere agent of their desire. But what happens where there is yet another barrier to entry when it comes to godhood? If the Jedi are ruined, but there is yet one more group of beings that stands in their way. That is the Celestials. According to the old doctrine of Jedi and Sith, the Celestials never truly departed the galaxy, but rather transcended into the Force and remained there as its guides. But apparently, these two religions saw the Celestials as not only guides to the Force, but of rather fate itself. There is nothing that a Sith Lord hates more than fate or destiny. They seek to break the shackles of doom and pursue the ending that has no ending, eternal life. But even that goal is protected by the Celestials and the will of the Force. It all states that beings must abide by the ever-looping cycle of life and death. According to the Force, the Ouroboros must continue swallowing its tail, continuing that infinite cycle whether the mortals like it or not. The Sith refuse to accept this, and instead choose to bend the Force to their will. but the Celestials act as its guides. They are the group of power that supersedes the understanding of all mortal beings in the Force. But of course, with the Sith being Sith, they do not back down, and accept that there are some beings out of their reach, and control, or even their understanding. This is all insulting to a Sith Lord. What the Celestials embody is not a level of power to achieve, but the gatekeepers of that power that the Sith desire to control with absolution. The power to rule and to control reality. And so the existence of the Celestials has little to no bearing on the Sith Order's plans to make the Force subservient to their will. Because as Plagueis pointed out, they believed that they were on the cusp of a breakthrough, a leap from the mortal to the immortal. Once Plagueis figured out how to manipulate the midichlorians, then he could undermine the power and authority that he perceives that the Celestials commanded. Either that, or he could topple them altogether. And when that occurred, the divide between organic life and the Force would be bridged. Or in other words, the mortal Sith could transform themselves into godlike beings by accessing the very source of life-giving energies itself. Then, they would fear death no longer. The Sith's terror of death is rooted not just in the desire to survive, but in the fundamental premise of their philosophy, the pursuit of power without limit. To the Sith, power is synonymous with identity. It is proof of their will's superiority over all obstacles, including the natural order of things. Death, therefore, is the ultimate insult. The inescapable evidence that no matter how mighty their domain, no matter how cunning their machinations, they remain subject to the same oblivion as a nameless being. This realization is intolerable to the Sith psyche, which depends upon the illusion that all things can be conquered by force of will. To die is to be forced into that same anonymous nothingness they had spent their lives clawing their way above. More profoundly, the Sith fear death because it strips away every pretense of permanence. Sith philosophy preaches that passion and the exertion of strength grant lasting transcendence, an escape from the mediocrity of the masses. But death exposes this creed as a fragile construction. In the end, no culmination of artifacts, no legacy of terror, and no titles endure in any tangible way. The desperate Sith Lords who sought immortality from Darth Endedu to Darth Sidious were driven by the horror of being forgotten, of seeing their empires crumble to dust, while the Force itself, an indifferent, timeless current, swept on without them. This is why Sith experiments in essence transfer and alchemy are so precious to them. They are attempts to deny the ultimate defeat, to insist the self can endure by any means necessary. The Celestials represent an existential affront to all of this. They are near mystic beings not only harnessed by the Force and mastery of it that dwarf any Sith Lord's understanding, but they transcend the mortal cycle entirely. In a way that the Sith find obscene, the Celestials imposed harmony and order on the galaxy not through fear or domination, but through their unchallenged attunement to the Force's deeper nature. Worse still, their continued existence in the Force after their fall of civilization implies that death is not an annihilation, but rather their evolution. To the Sith, this is maddening. It means that their own struggle to conquer death is not just futile, but misguided. What the Celestials achieved, they did without obsession. They did it without hatred, or the need to subjugate. This, more than anything, is why Sith ideology is inherently at odds with the Celestials even more than the Jedi. The Sith hate them because they embody everything the Sith fear. Beings who accepted the inevitability of death and have now moved beyond it. Not through clinging to identity, but through surrender to something larger and greater. Their surrender is the ultimate heresy in the Sith worldview. They believe that only by enforcing one's will can one be free. The Celestials are a living testament that the Sith's war on death is both doomed and unnecessary. To acknowledge this would require the Sith to accept limits, and in doing so, relinquish the core of their creed. It is easier to loathe the Celestials as arrogant usurpers than to confront the possibility that they were simply wiser. Their hatred of the Celestials was perhaps the greatest mark of arrogance for the Sith. It was the display of their dedication towards their mad dreams. It shows the scope of their desire for dominion and rule, which extends far beyond reigning over physical planets, the Republic, or even the galaxy. They wanted control of the unseen realm of the Force, and to be the beings to which all others were subservient to. For if they controlled the Force, then they controlled the energy from which all beings draw their very life. As masters of that resource, they would be sovereign. But it's the Celestials that stand in their way. Even if their physical presence is no longer felt, they are still there. The Ones, while they don't participate in galactic affairs, see to the balance of the Force itself, The daughter represents the light, son in turn represents the dark, and the father works to keep a balance of both of them. If Plagueis had known that there were sentient entities out there working against his desires for total dominion over the Force, it's likely that his plans would have changed a great deal. He might have even attempted to try to kill one of the Ones of Mortis. That mad plan is not out of the question for one such as Darth Plagueis, nor would it have been out of the realm of question for Sidious. And that is why the Sith absolutely hated the Ones. We have found in the Darth Plagueis novel many gems of Sith insight, as well as a characterization of the extent of the Sith's grand plan had it gone according to their wishes. Their goals were always far higher than most people believe, beyond any simple empire. As Sidious once said, a Sith should always be thinking on the grand scale. So tell us, my friends, have you wondered what the Sith thought about the Celestials or the Ones of Mortis? And did you know that their desire ran this deep? If you would like us to explore more of these deeper philosophical ideologies between the Jedi and Sith, or discuss more of the mystical concepts in a galaxy far, far away, be sure to let us know. As always, thank you guys so much for joining us today in the archives. May the Force be with you, and have a great one.